Racial violence has a long and ugly history in America. Contributor Kelefa Sanneh of The New Yorker has a case in point.
For generations, Tulsa, Oklahoma, had a secret.
My mother cared for an elderly white man who, on his deathbed, rambled on about the smoke and the fires and the shooting and the killing.
Michelle Brown, program coordinator at the city's Greenwood Cultural Center, says her mother tried to learn more.
And she went to her in-laws and said, "What is he talking about? What happened in Tulsa?" And they said, "Look, we don't talk about that around here, and don't go asking anybody about it."
The secret was passed from generation to generation.
We never discussed Black Wall Street or the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre.
The Tulsa Race Massacre happened 99 years ago, when white Tulsans descended on the city's thriving black district, known as Black Wall Street. White rioters killed hundreds of black residents and burned the neighborhood to the ground. It was sparked by an accusation that a black man attacked a white woman in a white-owned office building.
There's a scream. The elevator doors open and a man working in the building came running to see what had happened and claimed that Sarah Page had been assaulted. By the end of the day, they were claiming that she had been raped.
It wasn't taught in schools. The newspapers that reported on it were removed from our library. It was actively covered up in our community.
Tulsa's mayor, G.T. Bynum, says he first heard about the massacre in 2001.
Somebody brought it up, and I thought, that's ridiculous. There's no way something that awful happened in Tulsa, and nobody talked about it for 80 years, but then come to find that's exactly what happened here.
My great-grandmother, Rebecca Brown Crutcher, lived on Black Wall Street.
Tiffany Crutcher says her great-grandmother barely escaped.
She was self-sufficient. She had a barbecue joint. She was beautiful. All of a sudden, she had to run in fear of her life, jumped on the back of a truck and fled to Muskogee.
Rebecca Brown Crutcher lived until 1994.
We didn't get a chance to talk about the stories because of the fear. They were afraid to talk about it because they thought it might happen again.
Crutcher says she felt some of that same fear after her twin brother Terrence was shot and killed by Tulsa police in 2016. He was unarmed.
I answered the call and I heard my dad, my hero, screaming at the top of his lungs saying, "They killed my son. They killed my son." And I just finally asked, "Who killed Terrence?" And he said, "The police."
He's got his hands up there for her now.
Terrence Crutcher was 40 years old when Officer Betty Jo Shelby noticed him standing near the side of the road.
This guy's still walking.
His car was in the middle of the street.
Not for taser, I think.
In the police chopper, high above, officers give a kind of play-by-play.
That looks like a bad dude, too, to be honest with you.
To see him walking away with his hands up, I see the visual of him in my head every night that I lay my head down. And I pray to God, I ask him, take this away.
Mayor G.T. Bynum took office 3 months after Crutcher's death.
A lot of people saw what happened to Terrence Crutcher, and they said, this wouldn't have happened if he was a white man. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't.
Hundreds turned out to mourn Terrence Crutcher's death, which Bynum suggests was the result of drugs found in Crutcher's system, drugs that made him unable to follow directions. Officer Shelby says he failed to follow orders to stop, and that she shot him believing he was reaching into his car for a weapon.
It is more about the really insidious nature of drug utilization than it is about race, in my opinion.
You think he's sizing up the situation to see...
In 2017, Officer Shelby spoke with Bill Whitaker on 60 Minutes.
If I wait to find out if he had a gun or not, I could very well be dead. There's something that we always say. I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
But as it turned out, he did not have a gun.
No, he did not.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
The protests came after a jury found Betty Jo Shelby not guilty of manslaughter.
Don't shoot!
2017, 1921. Michelle Brown says the same attitudes that led to the Black Wall Street massacre linger in Tulsa to this day.
No one was ever held accountable for the hundreds of lives that were lost.
Do you think that this memory of the Tulsa massacre also shaped the behavior of the police in Tulsa in the generations afterward?
Not as much as racism that continues to be prevalent in our community. Racism is something that is learned at a very young age. And during the massacre, there were white men who went and gathered their sons and brought them to fight alongside them. They gave them the right to carry a gun and to shoot an innocent black person without any fear of any type of consequence.
My brother had struggles like millions of other Americans.
Tiffany Crutcher says she was stunned by Officer Shelby's acquittal.
I know the family was not satisfied with how that case played out in the justice system. Were you satisfied?
I think we have to have faith in that justice system.
Still, last week, Mayor Bynum announced that he's proposing an independent monitor to review police actions.
What was the thing you most wanted to change in the aftermath of your brother's killing?
I wanted to change the culture of policing, this notion of us versus them.
So Crutcher, a former physical therapist, is now a full-time advocate for police reform.
The police killed your brother. How do you get to a place where you're not afraid of the police?
I will be honest, I am afraid, but I do believe that we can get to a place if we change policies and if people are held accountable.
Michelle Brown.
As a resident of Tulsa, as a black mother, I am scared for my children. I am scared for this younger generation who are tired of being told to pray about it, to sing, to go to church, to put it in God's hands. They're tired of hearing that.
99 years after Black Wall Street, the fear lives on.
Who would think in 2020 in the United States of America that we would fear from the very people that are meant to protect us?
Tiffany Crutcher can't change how her brother died, but she hopes there are things she can change for Tulsa and for herself.
I believe that in order for that to happen, that the laws at the highest level that give police officers the authority to commit legal murder with no accountability has to be changed. The use of force standard has to be changed. And when that happens, he could then finally rest in peace.
And that you could find some peace too.
Absolutely, absolutely.